If you are reading this right now, your soul has just made a monumental decision that most people in this life will never make, not because they lack the capability, but because their spiritual state will not allow them to. Right now, in this exact saniye, something deep within your heart is vibrating with a pattern of absolute faith that has chosen the steep, narrow mountain path of truth over the easy downward descent into worldly distraction. You did not arrive at this crossroads through mere human calculation. The Nur, divine light within your heart, guided you. Your spiritual shield, granted by your Creator, registered the fork in the road and steered you toward what worldly minds call impossible, while the energy of the masses naturally flowed toward mindless comfort. This is not a poetic metaphor. This is the literal, spiritual mechanics of creation. The fact that you are here, engaged with these words, feeling a deep expansion within your chest right now, means your soul has just crossed a sacred threshold that permanently changes everything about what can and cannot touch your life anymore. Let me show you exactly what just took place. There is an extraordinary occurrence in the natural world that most human beings never pause to witness. A massive colony of penguins stands at the jagged edge of their known world, thousands of them, all facing the exact same choice. The abundant ocean is right before them, familiar, comfortable, and the entirely logical path for survival. Yet suddenly, a single penguin turns completely away from the warm water. It turns its back on the crowd and faces the towering mountains, 70 kilometers of frozen, unforgiving wasteland with absolutely no guarantees and no visible food source. It feels an inexplicable internal pull toward what looks like certain destruction, and it begins to walk completely alone into the impossible. Every single worldly spectator who watches that footage asks the same logical question. Why? What is wrong with that creature? Why would it choose suffering over safety? But you are asking an entirely different question right now, aren't you? Your soul is asking, what does that penguin know? Because something deep within your Fitrah, innate nature, instantly recognizes that lonely walk. You have taken that exact walk yourself. Perhaps you are walking it this very moment, while everyone around you smoothly flows toward the warm worldly waters, the obvious, lucrative career, the comfortable but compromised relationship, the path of least resistance that makes perfect sense to ordinary human consciousness. Your spiritual frequency keeps turning you toward the mountains of truth, and you have probably spent years wondering what was wrong with you. Absolutely nothing is wrong with you. Your spiritual heart is operating on a completely different divine principle than the heedless masses of the Dunya world. Let me explain what that means in reality. The spiritual defenses of the majority of mankind are calibrated strictly for worldly comfort optimization. Their minds are programmed to constantly seek the path of least resistance, not because they are inherently evil, but because their hearts are still operating from basic survival templates that falsely equate worldly safety with stagnant sameness. Their internal mechanisms are doing exactly what they were built to do: protect them from immediate physical risk, guide them toward proven material resources, and keep them alive within the highly limited, known parameters of this lower life. But your heart registered a completely different divine signal. Somewhere in your destiny, the light of faith within you detected that the comfortable, heedless path would actually destroy you, not physically, but spiritually. Your internal shield recognized that if you followed the warm current of the crowd, if you merged with the mass migration toward easy, unaligned abundance, something essential and divine within your soul would die. Not might die, would die. And so your faith made a definitive choice that your logical mind still doesn't fully comprehend. It turned you toward the mountains of isolation for the sake of Allah. Here is the profound secret no one tells you about that spiritual turn. The exact moment your heart chooses the mountain path of devotion, you become completely untouchable by everything that operates on the superficial comfort frequency of the world. Let that truth land deeply. The manipulative forces, the spiritual chaos, the fear patterns, and the chronic anxieties that completely control people who are flowing toward easy worldly water, those frequencies can literally no longer reach your soul. This is not because you are arrogant or superior to them, but because your heart is vibrating in a completely different spiritual range. You have shifted into an elevated band of faith, and what thrives in the lowlands of worldly indulgence cannot cross into the high mountains of absolute tawakkul. The divine physics of creation simply will not permit it.
This is the supreme principle that entirely rewrites your understanding of divine protection. You have been falsely taught by society that true safety comes from choosing the proven path, the crowded path, the path where everyone else has successfully accumulated material wealth. But that is the logic of the Dunya. That is survival template thinking, rooted in a lack of faith. The high mountain path of Iman, faith, operates on a completely different divine law. Your protection does not come from choosing artificial safety. Your protection comes from choosing absolute ikhlas, sincerity, and alignment with your Creator. When your heart turns toward what is true in the sight of Allah, even when it looks completely insane to everyone around you, you activate a powerful divine shield that makes you completely unreachable by everything that does not belong on your sacred timeline. Feel the profound shift that happens in your body when you hear this. That is not mere emotional relief, that is raw spiritual recognition. Something deep inside your soul already knew this. You simply required the vocabulary of faith to unlock it. Every single time you chose the harder path, the lonelier path, the path that made absolutely no logical sense to worldly minds, you were not being self-destructive. You were practicing absolute obedience to the divine signal within your heart. The light of your faith was intentionally navigating you away from toxic timelines where you would have been surrounded by people who operate purely on worldly comfort. You did not lose your community, you simply outgrew the spiritual octave where that community exists. Yes, that creates a profound gap, a temporary void between where you used to live and where Allah is leading your soul. It is a space where you can no longer return to your old toxic connections, but you have not yet fully arrived at your new righteous ones. And that gap, that temporary void, that is precisely where most people panic and turn around. That is where the illusion of the world wins over the weak heart, because the gap feels like a lonely death. But it is not death. It is a sacred spiritual gestation. You are standing in the quiet space between states of being right now. Your old worldly dependencies have dissolved. Your new spiritual station is actively forming, and within this transition gap, you are actually more powerful through Allah than you have ever been, even though you feel more raw and vulnerable than ever before. This is the sublime paradox of the mountain path. The exact moment you appear most unprotected by fragile human standards is the exact moment you are most fiercely protected by divine standards. Because in that quiet void, you are completely untouchable by anything that requires your old, heedless state of mind to reach you. The spiritual attacks that would have utterly destroyed you last year can't even find your location anymore. The toxic energy vampires and worldly critics who used to drain you daily are sending out signals that simply dissolve harmlessly in the vast space around your heart. You are not exhaustion fighting them off. You are literally vibrating in a spiritual range they cannot access. Can you feel the immense weight lifting from your soul? That is not loneliness you are experiencing right now. That is your spiritual sovereignty, Izzah. Your heart is finally learning to exist without the constant draining interference of low worldly frequencies that were never yours to carry to begin with. Every worldly opinion you are no longer swayed by, every petty drama you are no longer pulled into, and every crisis that used to completely destabilize you, that now just passes by like passing weather, you observe but never enter. That is not you becoming cold or unfeeling. That is the divine light within you establishing its actual boundaries. That is your spiritual shield discovering what it was always designed by Allah to do. Protect the purity of your faith so completely that only what matches the truth of your devotion can ever enter your life. If this truth is landing firmly within your heart, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the profound spiritual activations coming next.
Now, let us travel somewhere deeper. Close your eyes for a brief moment if you are able. Imagine a massive, ancient lighthouse built of solid stone, standing on a remote, jagged cliff that everyone in the modern harbor said was too isolated, too dangerous, and too detached from civilization to ever be useful. For years, that lighthouse stands in absolute solitude. No common ships come close enough to witness its light, and no ordinary sailors benefit from its presence. It is just cold stone, a brilliant beam of light, and endless dark water. If that lighthouse could think with a limited human mind, it would think the exact same thoughts you have been torturing yourself with. I am utterly useless. I am too far removed from everything. I should have been built down where the busy harbor is, where all the other lights are, where I could easily fit in and help ordinary people. But then, one night, a catastrophic storm arrives. Not the kind of minor storm that the shallow harbor lights were designed to handle, but a tempest that operates on a completely different level of devastation. Out in that raging storm, there is a magnificent ship, a vessel carrying a cargo so immensely valuable, so rare, and so essential to the kingdom that it was forbidden from taking the easy harbor route. It was forced by decree to take the deep, dangerous passage, the route that runs directly past the jagged cliff. In the absolute darkest moment of that terrifying voyage, when the captain is on the verge of giving up, about to lose everything to the waves, there it is, a single blazing light exactly where it needs to be. A lighthouse that worldly experts claimed was built in the wrong place, shining brilliantly at the exact frequency this precious ship needs to navigate and survive. You are that lighthouse, and by Allah's decree, you are also that ship.
Part of you is the steady beacon that had to be built in deep isolation so it could serve a spiritual frequency that the shallow harbor lights of the world will never comprehend. And part of you is the noble vessel carrying a faith so precious that it cannot take the easy worldly route, cannot stop at the common ports of heedlessness, and cannot be guided by the superficial lights that direct normal worldly traffic. You are both simultaneously. The divine decree had to isolate your life so you could become the unshakable signal that guides your own soul through the storm. One day, very soon, your steadfastness will become the exact signal that guides others who are taking the same deep passage, not because you are preaching to them, but because you are shining with a purity of faith they desperately need to survive their own mountain path. Let that reality settle deeply into your heart. You were not broken by your period of isolation. You were explicitly forged by it. Every single moment you spent alone, crying out and wondering why you couldn't just be like everyone else, the light of faith within your heart was learning to hold a frequency so pure, so specific, and so uncontaminated by the illusions of mass society that it is now capable of doing something most human energy fields will never achieve. It can hold light in absolute darkness. It can maintain divine coherence in the midst of worldly chaos. It can remain a stable signal of sakina, tranquility, in the absolute eye of a storm. That spiritual capacity is not something you develop in the comfortable harbor. That is a station you earn on the lonely cliff. Here is the ultimate truth that shifts your entire reality. The mountain path is not the hard path, it is the matching path. You have been falsely interpreting your life's struggles as evidence that you made a wrong choice or that Allah was angry with you. But struggle is not an indicator of misalignment with God. Your resistance to your true spiritual calling was the actual source of your struggle. When you were desperately trying to flow with everyone else toward the warm water of heedlessness, that was the real struggle. That was your soul fighting violently against its own Fitrah, trying to suffocate itself inside a worldly bandwidth where it never belonged. The moment you turned toward the mountains of true devotion, the spiritual struggle did not increase, your divine clarity increased, and clarity always feels like a harsh struggle to a mind that has been deeply conditioned to value worldly comfort over divine truth. Your faith is your absolute protection. Say that out loud right now, wherever you are. My faith is my protection. Feel the immense energetic shift when those words move through your soul. That is not a superficial positive affirmation. That is a profound spiritual activation. You are not trying to convince your mind of something that might be true. You are remembering an eternal law that has always been true. The only reason you have survived every emotional trauma, every betrayal, and every crisis that should have completely destroyed your sanity is not because you possess human strength as the world measures it. It is because the light of faith Allah placed within you will not allow destruction to ever touch the core of who you are. Your internal shield has been operating this entire time without your conscious awareness, deflecting spiritual attacks you didn't even know were coming, and routing your destiny away from timelines that were trying to entrap your soul.
And now, the exact moment you become conscious of this, the moment you absorb these words and feel this deep truth, your spiritual shield undergoes a massive divine upgrade. This is not cold information you are reading. This is a spiritual transmission you are integrating into your heart. The moment you recognize that your faith is your protection, your entire life permanently reorganizes around that supreme truth. What used to slip through the cracks of your awareness no longer can harm you. The worldly chaos that used to completely destabilize your emotions now just bounces off harmlessly, not because you are fighting harder with human willpower, but because you are aligned more completely with your Creator. Absolute alignment creates a spiritual coherence that low-frequency worldly chaos can never penetrate. The divine physics of Allah's decree simply will not permit it. But look at the next magnificent layer. The mountain path does not just protect you from the toxic world behind you, it is actively leading you toward the majestic blessings ahead. Every single step you take into the cold, into the unknown, and into the space where there are no human guarantees, you are not moving away from abundance. You are moving toward the true specific abundance that matches the purity of your soul. The shallow harbor of the world is full of cheap fish, yes, but those resources are strictly for the masses who stayed behind in heedlessness. Those worldly rewards are frequency matched to comfort consciousness. If you had forced yourself to stay there, you would have survived physically, but your soul would have starved to death. You would have possessed everything you need for the body, except the one thing your spirit cannot live without: alignment with its Lord. The mountains of faith hold a completely different kind of abundance, not more in a greedy worldly sense, but infinitely better. It is divinely specific abundance. There are spiritual and material resources waiting for you in the unknown that can only exist for those who have the courage to walk away from guaranteed worldly comfort. This is not because Allah is playing games or testing your worthiness through cruel suffering, but because certain high frequencies of divine blessing can only activate in the presence of a mountain-grade consciousness. The profound, life-changing inspirations of the heart, they do not download while you are sitting in the lazy harbor. The deep, righteous connections that will transform your reality, they never occur in the warm crowds of superficial people. The timeline shifts that will unveil your true divine purpose,
They never occur in the space where everyone else is celebrating their worldly safety. They occur exclusively in the gap, in the quiet void, in the 70 kilometers of nothingness where you are walking by faith alone, wondering if you made a mistake, feeling the full weight of every sacrifice that brought you here. That is exactly where the quantum field of divine mercy opens wide. That is where the light within your heart expands far beyond what you thought was possible. That is where you discover that you are not merely walking toward the mountain. By Allah's grace, you have become the mountain. Everything that seemed like an empty, frozen wasteland in your life was actually the beautiful landscape of your own consciousness, learning to hold frequencies of faith that a shallow, comfort-obsessed reality could never contain. Reflect deeply. When was the exact moment you first felt the light of faith activate within your life? When did you first know you were completely different? When did you realize you were being pulled away from the crowd and toward the mountains? Share that moment in the comments below.
Testify to the moment your heart made the turn, because your story of survival might be the exact divine confirmation another struggling soul needs to keep walking tonight. Here is the ultimate truth that changes your entire life perspective. You did not blindly choose the mountain path. Your divine destiny chose you. Before you were born into this dunya, before you possessed human language, and long before you had a story about who you were supposed to be, your soul was already calibrated for this elevated mountain frequency of faith. Every single hard trial that happened to you, every bitter betrayal, every devastating loss, and every agonizing moment where you were overlooked, underestimated, or left behind, those were never random accidents. Those were highly calculated divine adjustments. The light within your heart was being systematically shaped and purified by the best of planners, who knew exactly what your soul would require in order to hold the immense light you are about to carry for His sake. Yes, it hurt deeply. Yes, it may still hurt right now, but your pain is not evidence of a punishment from Allah. Your pain is the absolute evidence of your spiritual expansion. Your soul is being stretched by the divine hand to hold a volume of light and wisdom it could never contain before. The people who hurt you, the systems that rejected you, and the worldly opportunities that slammed shut before you could reach them, they were never obstacles, they were divine filters. Your spiritual shield was learning to recognize what does not match your true destiny, and was automatically routing you away from it before you got trapped in a timeline of ghafla that would have kept your soul small. Every closed door was not a rejection, it was Allah saying, "Not this." Every person who walked out of your life was not abandoning you, they were being frequency sorted out of your field by divine decree, because their low worldly presence would have completely interfered with the sacred activation you are moving toward. Now that you have arrived here, now that you have walked this far into the mountains of devotion, you are finally in the spiritual range where your true divine abundance can reach you. Not because you earned it through suffering, but because your heart is finally vibrating at the frequency of absolute tawakkul, where those blessings have been waiting for you all along. Pause right here. This is an active spiritual calibration. I am going to give you a declaration of faith, and I want you to say it out loud with conviction. If you cannot speak it, type it clearly in the comments. Let it move through your entire being as a vibration of truth. Ready? My heart is firmly anchored in Allah. He is my path, my protector, and my destination. Say it. Feel the profound physical opening in your chest the moment those words move through your soul. That sudden sense of expansion is not a mere emotional reaction. That is your Fitrah instantly recognizing its true design. That is your spiritual shield remembering exactly what it was created by Allah to do. Now, here's what makes this path completely different from superficial spiritual trends. Most worldly teachings tell you to aggressively raise your vibration, manipulate your energy, and try to ascend above the human struggle. But that's not how true mountain faith works. You are not trying to manifest a higher ego. You are trying to achieve absolute clarity of heart. You are not escaping humanity, you are descending into the absolute core of your own divine truth with such completeness that everything that doesn't belong to Allah falls away from your life automatically. Mountain consciousness is not about pretending the struggle doesn't exist. It is about being so deeply rooted in your connection to your Creator that the worldly struggle can no longer shake your inner peace. You are protected not by superficial height, but by unshakable spiritual depth.
Think back to the penguin again. It is not flying safely above the freezing cold. It is actively walking right through it, completely exposed and completely vulnerable by every conventional measure, yet totally untouchable, because its internal nature is so perfectly aligned with its designated path that the cold becomes entirely irrelevant, the immense distance becomes irrelevant, and the absolute isolation becomes irrelevant, not because those harsh conditions aren't real, but because they pose absolutely no obstacle to a consciousness that is perfectly matched to its divine truth. The creature is not fighting the mountain, it is moving through the mountain, because the mountain is exactly what it needs to fulfill its design. In response, the mountain opens a path. You are that servant right now. You have been walking through life conditions that would have completely broken the sanity of ordinary people, yet you are still here, still moving, still breathing, and still holding on to your faith, even when every worldly voice around you is screaming at you to give up, go back, and choose the easier path of compromise. Do you want to know why you are incapable of giving up? It is not mere human willpower, it is not your ego's strength, and it is not even your own superficial efforts. It is the frequency of your Iman. The light within your heart will not allow you to turn back, because turning back would plunge you right back into a bandwidth of heedlessness where your soul would be utterly destroyed by forces you have already outgrown. Your divine shield is actively protecting you from your own retreat. It is holding you on this difficult path not as a punishment, but as absolute preservation for your eternity.
And here is the beautiful secret that most people miss. The mountain path of faith actually gets easier, not because the external conditions change, but because your spiritual capacity completely expands. With every single step you take in absolute alignment with your Creator, your heart learns to hold more divine light, more unshakable clarity, and more spiritual power. What felt completely impossible to bear last year feels completely natural to you now. The trials that felt like they would kill your spirit last month, you barely notice today. Not because you are becoming numb or cold, but because you are becoming beautifully calibrated by Allah. Your heart is adjusting to the mountain frequency of absolute tawakkul, and as it adjusts, the mountain stops feeling like a brutal enemy and begins to feel like your true spiritual home. Let me show you exactly what I mean through a real example. There was a righteous woman we will call Mara, who spent 15 exhausting years trying to build a career and a lifestyle that made perfect sense to society. Every worldly mentor told her the exact same thing: find the proven safe model, follow the successful path of the crowd, do only what works for other people. Mara tried with all her might. She implemented every strategy, followed every corporate blueprint, and sacrificed her peace, yet absolutely nothing worked. This was not because she lacked capability or commitment, but because the light of faith within her soul actively sabotaged every comfortable, unaligned path she tried to settle into. Every time she got close to worldly success, everything would violently fall apart. A trusted partnership would dissolve, a major project would fail, or a golden opportunity would vanish at the last possible sanye. For 15 long years, she interpreted this chronic disruption as absolute evidence that she was broken, that something was fundamentally wrong with her, and that she was being punished by God for some hidden failure she couldn't identify.
until one day, through divine mercy, she completely stopped trying to force herself into the world's mold. She stopped chasing the proven path of the crowd, and she asked a radically different question. What if nothing is wrong with me? What if Allah's decree is intentionally blocking these doors to show me a truth I keep refusing to see? The exact moment she asked that question with true humility, everything shifted, not externally, but deep within her heart. She suddenly realized that every single time a worldly plan fell apart, it collapsed right before she would have been permanently locked into a timeline of spiritual heedlessness that did not belong to her soul. Every failure was actually an act of divine protection. Every slammed door was a forced redirection by the hand of mercy. So she stopped fighting her destiny. She stopped trying to make the comfortable harbor of the world work for her, and she turned completely toward the mountains of true devotion. She began building a life and a calling centered entirely on absolute truth, something that made zero sense to the worldly critics, had no safe corporate model, and which every secular expert told her would fail. And for the first time in 15 years, true spiritual and physical flow began, not because the path was lazy or easy, but because it was divinely aligned. Her heart finally had permission to operate at its true capacity of faith, and the very moment it did, the righteous resources, the deep connections, and the pure opportunities that were frequency matched to her truth began to manifest out of nowhere. Not down in the shallow harbor of the crowd, but high up in the mountains, exactly where she needed to be to receive them from Al-Razak, the provider. Mara is your exact story, and you are Mara. You have been exhausting your spirit, trying to make the shallow harbor of the world work for you, because that is where society told you abundance lives. But the light of Allah within you has been intentionally breaking those worldly structures to turn your face toward the mountains, because that is where your true spiritual and material abundance has been designated. Every single time you have failed at the comfortable, heedless path, you were not failing at all. You were beautifully rerouted by divine mercy. Your spiritual shield was protecting you from timelines where you would have possessed everything the world values, except the one thing that matters most, your closeness to your Creator. Now that you are finally listening, now that you are walking in the direction your faith has been pulling you all along, you are about to discover the grand blessings that have been waiting for you in the cold isolation. Here is your active spiritual calibration. Place your hand firmly over your chest. Feel your heartbeat. That steady rhythm, that consistent pulse, that is not just cold biological mechanics, that is your soul announcing its presence to the divine decree. Every beat is a signal, every breath is a declaration to creation. Right now, in this exact moment, your heart is broadcasting a definitive message to the universe. O Allah, I am ready only for what aligns with your pleasure. I am no longer available for what distances me from you. Say that out loud with absolute clarity. I am ready only for what aligns with Allah's pleasure. I am no longer available for what distances me from Him. Feel the immediate shift within your energy field. That is your heart organizing itself under the banner of Tawheed. That is your spiritual shield updating its divine filters. You have just declared to your own consciousness exactly what level of faith you are holding, and the decree has recorded it. Your soul has responded. Now here is what will manifest next in your life. In the coming days and weeks, you are going to notice things and people falling away from your life that you falsely thought you desperately needed. Relationships will suddenly feel hollow. Worldly opportunities will suddenly feel heavy and wrong. And paths you were once highly excited about will now feel like spiritual chains. Do not panic. Do not look at this clearing as a tragic loss. That is your faith doing exactly what you just asked it to do. It is systematically purging your life of everything that does not match the pure signal of devotion you just broadcasted. Allah is clearing space in your container. It may feel like your world is falling apart, but it is not falling apart. It is beautifully falling away. Understand the massive difference. Falling apart is chaotic destruction. Falling away is divine clarity. Your spiritual field is releasing what it can no longer carry, so it can finally receive the true blessings it has been waiting for. In that quiet space, in the transition gap between what is leaving your life and what is yet to arrive, you are going to feel intensely raw and exposed. You are going to look at the empty space and feel a wave of panic that whispers you made a catastrophic mistake. That is the low comfort frequency of the world trying to terrorize your mind. That is your old lifestyle sending out a desperate retrieval signal. Do not answer it. Do not turn back to the harbor. Your soul has already moved far beyond that narrow bandwidth. If you try to return to what is familiar just because the emptiness scares you, you will discover that it no longer brings you safety. It brings absolute suffocation, because you have spiritually expanded far beyond the tight container that used to hold you, and you cannot force yourself to become small again just because standing tall in the unknown feels uncertain. Share with us in the comments what explicit spiritual practice has strengthened your faith and protected your heart the most. What helps you stay anchored in mountain frequency when the heavy distractions of the world try to call you back? Your profound insight could be the exact life raft another believer needs to read right now.
This is your ultimate threshold. This is the exact point of the journey where the majority of mankind panics and turns around. They get to the very edge of their spiritual awakening, the transition gap looks too wide, and they retreat in fear back to the comfortable harbor of heedlessness, spending the rest of their days wondering what would have happened if they had possessed the courage to keep walking with their Lord. Do not be like the majority of mankind. You did not endure the fires of your past trials just to stop at the threshold of your victory. You did not survive everything Allah brought you through just to play it safe in the dregs of the world now. Your destiny brought you to this point because here is where your soul undergoes true transformation. Here is where you discover that you are not just walking a difficult path. By the grace of Allah, you have become a mountain of unshakable faith, and the very path you thought you were walking has actually been walking you back into your true self. Let me remind you of what the righteous of the past understood that modern society has forgotten. True protection does not come from building physical walls or hoarding material wealth. Absolute protection comes from your spiritual alignment with Allah. The most unshakable shields in existence are completely spiritual. A heart that is fully operating in its true design of tawheed and sincerity is completely untouchable by anything that vibrates at a lower level of worldly chaos, not because it is violently fighting, but because it is perfectly coherent. Chaos cannot penetrate true inner peace. Sakina cannot penetrate absolute divine clarity, and worldly manipulation can never penetrate the rock of truth. When your life is aligned completely with your Creator, when your heart is broadcasting its true signal of devotion without worldly interference, you become completely unreachable by every dark force that used to dominate your emotions. This is not poetic imagery. This is the literal mechanics of the spirit. Your spiritual state is a divine field that responds perfectly to what your heart is holding. When you fill your heart with worldly fear, your life will naturally allow and attract everything that matches fear. When you fill your heart with persistent doubt, your life will attract and allow everything that matches doubt. But when you fill your heart with absolute truth, when you fill it with the unshakable weight of yaqeen and divine alignment, your spiritual shield becomes a filter so mathematically precise that only what matches the pleasure of Allah can ever pierce your reality. Everything else simply dissolves into nothingness before it ever gets close to your heart. Not because you are physically pushing it away, but because the divine light within you refuses its entry. Look at what this looks like practically in your daily life. The toxic social drama that used to completely pull you in and drain your energy, you will now watch it happen around you and feel absolutely nothing. The emotional manipulation that used to completely destabilize your mind, you will see it coming from miles away, and it won't even register as a threat to your peace. The worldly fear that used to dictate your choices, you will notice it in the room and realize it has zero power over your soul anymore. Not because you conquered it through human aggression, but because you have frequency shifted your soul into a station of faith where fear cannot exist. You did not fight your way to freedom through worldly means. You spiritually shifted your way to absolute sovereignty through Allah. Sovereignty does not panic or fight. Sovereignty simply rests in the power of its Lord, and everything that is false dissolves into rock in its presence. Can you feel that profound truth vibrating within you? That is not a temporary emotion of hope. That is raw, permanent yaqeen. Something deep within your soul is testifying that this is the absolute law of reality. You have already experienced fleeting moments of this throughout your life, moments where you felt completely flooded with absolute peace, right in the absolute center of a catastrophic crisis. Moments where you knew a truth before it manifested, and moments where you were placed exactly where you needed to be at the exact right millisecond, with zero logical explanation for how you got there. Those were never hasin itifaq, pleasant coincidences. Those were sacred moments when your heart was perfectly aligned with the divine decree, allowing your spiritual shield to operate at its full capacity. The deep clarity, the fierce protection, and the profound sense of being held by the hand of mercy that you felt in those moments, those are not meant to be rare, accidental exceptions. That is your natural, divinely ordained state of being. That is exactly what manifests when your heart is broadcasting its true signal of devotion without worldly interference. And now that you are fully conscious of this divine law, now that you understand exactly how it operates, you can stop waiting for those moments of inner peace to happen accidentally. You can start generating them intentionally, not through exhausting worldly striving, but through absolute spiritual alignment. Every single time you choose divine truth over worldly comfort, the light of your faith clarifies. Every time you honor the authentic voice of your conscience over the validation of society, your spiritual shield strengthens. Every time you walk firmly toward what is right in the eyes of Allah, even when it looks completely insane to a heedless world, your divine shield expands its territory. The more you do this, the more you live your daily life from the high mountain path of Tawakkul instead of the shallow harbor of worldly compliance, the more you will realize a magnificent truth. You are not trying to become protected. Through Allah, you already are untouchable. You simply forgot your noble station, and tonight you are remembering. Here is the supreme principle that entirely rewrites your reality. You are not merely walking an external path in life. By the power of Allah, you are generating a spiritual field around your existence. Every choice you make, every thought you cultivate, and every emotion you feed is a specific spiritual frequency. That frequency is broadcasting outward from your heart in all directions, creating a protective or destructive field around your life that strictly determines what can and cannot reach your reality. The majority of mankind are generating their life fields completely unconsciously. They are constantly broadcasting fear, worry, and discontentment, and then wondering why threats and crises keep manifesting in their daily lives. They are broadcasting a lack of faith and wondering why their blessings keep disappearing. They are broadcasting internal spiritual chaos and wondering why absolute peace constantly evades them. But you are entirely different. You are reading these words tonight because your faith is ready to become fully conscious, ready to take absolute responsibility for the spiritual field you are generating from your heart, and ready to discover the truth that you are never a helpless victim of your worldly reality. You are the broadcaster of your reality through your state of heart. When you deeply integrate this divine law into your soul, everything changes. You completely stop asking the victim's question of, "Why is this tragedy happening to me?" and you begin asking the master's question, "What weakness or attachment am I holding in my heart that is allowing this darkness to enter?" You stop exhausting yourself trying to fix external worldly circumstances, and you focus entirely on adjusting your internal spiritual broadcast through istighfar and tawbah, repentance. You stop looking for protection outside yourself in the fragile means of creation, and you activate the permanent protection that Al-Hafiz, the protector, has placed within your soul all along, your shield of faith, which has been operating this entire time, just waiting for your heart to recognize it, so it can show you the miracles it is truly capable of manifesting in your life. This is the profound lesson that only the high mountain path of trial can teach you. You can never learn this depth of faith while sitting lazily in the comfortable harbor of the world. You can never discover this unshakable power inside a lifestyle of heedless comfort. You can never activate this level of divine protection when you are constantly surrounded by superficial people who are validating your worldly compliance. You must have the spiritual courage to walk into the unknown. You must face the cold isolation. You must be completely alone with your Creator long enough that you stop trying to match the shallow frequency of the crowd, and you start broadcasting the pure signal of your own authentic faith. That is exactly what your life has been doing. That is what every single agonizing step of your past trials was preparing you for. Not to merely survive the mountain, but to become the mountain of faith itself.
to embody a spiritual frequency so stable, so clear, and so unshakable that your character becomes the very signal of light by which other lost souls navigate their way out of the dark. And you are almost there. Your soul is so close to this breakthrough, you can likely feel the internal pressure mounting this very sania. That intense intuitive sense that a massive shift is about to unfold in your life. That deep knowing that you are standing on the absolute precipice of a breakthrough that will change your destiny forever. That is not wishful thinking or a mind game. That is your spiritual heart detecting the beautiful alignment of divine decree that is arriving. You have been walking toward this defining moment through years of pain, and it is finally here. Not because you have arrived at a physical destination on a map, but because your heart has finally arrived at the correct frequency of faith. And that frequency is about to unlock your direct access to every grand blessing, every righteous door, and every miraculous resource that has been locked away for you in the high mountains. The answers, the connections, and the breakthroughs are all frequency locked by divine wisdom, and tonight your surrender to Allah is the key that turns the lock.
But here is the final, ultimate layer of the secret. The key is not a physical object you go find. The key is the spiritual state you must become. You have spent your entire life looking for the answers outside yourself, chasing the right worldly teacher, searching for the perfect self-help practice, or begging for the right person who will finally see your worth and validate that you are on the correct path. But the answer is not out there in the creation. The answer is entirely in here, in the spiritual state of your heart, in your unshakable faith, and in the divine shield that has been fiercely protecting you, guiding your steps, and holding your sanity together this entire time. The exact millisecond you stop gazing outward at the world and start listening deeply to the light within your soul, the moment you stop trying to please creation and start being the pure servant you already are, everything you have been searching for will find your location, not because you became clever enough by human standards, but because your heart finally became clear enough before its Lord. Your faith is your absolute protection, your connection to Allah is your ultimate power, and your spiritual alignment is the source of your true abundance. The difficult mountain path you have been walking all these years, it was never leading you away from a blessed life. It was actively leading you into your real life. Your true life, the one that matches who you actually are in the sight of your Creator, instead of the hollow person society told you to be. The life where you are no longer constantly exhausting yourself, fighting to fit into toxic crowds, because you are finally standing in a spiritual range where your soul truly belongs. The life where you never have to defend your righteous choices to heedless critics, because everyone Allah surrounds you with is operating at the exact same frequency of devotion, and your choices make perfect sense to them. The life where you are never truly alone, because you are surrounded by other mountains of faith, other beacons of light, and other souls who chose divine truth over worldly comfort, and discovered that the cold isolation of the path is not empty, it is entirely full. It is full of exactly what your spirit needs and full of the absolute majesty of who you are. So keep walking, keep moving forward into the mountains, keep choosing the pleasure of Allah over the approval of human beings. Keep turning your face toward what is right and pure, even when the path looks completely impossible to your mind. Keep trusting the divine signal within your heart, even when every heedless voice in your ear is trying to convince you that you are entirely wrong. Because you are not wrong, you are just different. And being spiritually different is not a sign of being broken. Being different means you are frequency specific, designated for a high station of faith. You were never created to waste away in the stagnant harbor of the Dunya. You were explicitly built by your Creator for the high mountains of Tawakkul, and those mountains have been waiting for your arrival. Now, finally, by His grace, you are here. Whenever you need to realign your heart with this unshakable frequency of faith, come back to this divine transmission during your quiet moments of meditation or right before you sleep, and let these words recalibrate the spiritual field of your life. If you know another brother or sister who is currently walking their own lonely mountain path, someone who desperately needs to be reminded that they are not broken, just spiritually different, share this truth with them immediately. When you pass these divine activations forward, you are not merely helping a friend, you are actively strengthening the collective field of true faith, creating powerful ripples of divine coherence that help all of us hold this light of Iman more powerfully against the darkness of the world. Go to the comments section right now and type this exact phrase with absolute conviction. I am a servant of Allah, and He is my signal. Do not explain it to the worldly critics. Do not add anything to it. Just type those words clearly. I am a servant of Allah, and He is my signal. Watch what happens within your spirit. Watch who responds to your light. Watch who finds your location. Because the exact moment you declare your spiritual frequency publicly, you become a brilliant beacon for every other lonely traveler who is walking the mountain path. You become the lighthouse on the high cliff, and the noble ships that desperately require your specific light, they will find you. Not because you are marketing yourself through worldly desperation, but because you are broadcasting your true faith, and by the divine law of creation, spiritual frequency always finds its matching frequency. Always.
You are ready. You have always been ready. The only thing that was ever blocking your path was the false worldly belief that you needed to be something other than what Allah created you to be. But you don't. You never did. You simply needed to be the pure servant that you are, so completely, so unapologetically, and so coherently that the light within your heart could finally broadcast at its full, divinely ordained power. And now it can, now it is, and tonight everything in your destiny changes for the better. Welcome to the high mountains of faith. Welcome to your true spiritual frequency. Welcome to the shield of divine protection. The light of your faith activates right now.